ChicagoRuby. They don't understand it wasn't.
What kind of surprises did you have once you launched operationally?
We had some database issues. Well, I was surprised to find out that we had a 32-bit hardware for our data, or 32-bit Linux install on our 64-bit hardware. So when we tried to increase max connections on MySQL, it blew up, said out of memory. And I'm like, well, why are we out of memory? He's got like 32 gigs of memory in this box. He's like, well, it's only 2 addressable. I'm like, what? Can't you make it 64? So that was a big surprise to me. And then so we've recently upgraded to 64-bit. So that'll allow us to bring on more mongrels. We actually have 4 databases we connect to. We kind of partitioned off our data into separate databases, depending on what type of data it was.
So a given mongrel instance has to connect to more than one database?
Same database with 4 connections. Well, same database server. It could be a different server, obviously, but it's 4 databases. So every mongrel connects to 4. So you have 96, let's call it 100 times 4. You have 400 connections already. And I wanted to get, I think I wanted some, when I did the architecture, I wanted like 256 mongrels total, and that'd be like 1,000 database connections. And they say the MySQL can scale up to about 4,000 without a problem. So then when we got to like 150, it started breaking. I'm like, what's going on here? So that's when we discovered that issue. I was also surprised to see how little our Apaches do. Those servers are just completely idle, 99% idle all day long. They don't do anything. And so we got web servers just sit there doing nothing. And then our app servers do a lot, and our search servers do a lot, because most of our traffic is search related. That was also another surprise, not necessarily from a architecture thing, but just the way the users ended up using the site. And we added this new faceted searching and a much stronger emphasis on searching. All the traffic went to that type of we're doing our load testing. We said maybe only a quarter of the traffic would be search traffic, and then it turned out to be a lot more than that.
Do you write your own search engines, or use something like we've seen?
We use Solar.
Solar?
Yep. So that's the only Java component in this whole mix, and I think we just wrote a few lines of code to handle that search, but there's not a whole lot of custom code. Mostly just the search schema that we have. That was where all the development went in there. And then we're giving back to the community, like doing stuff like this. We have a lot of cool plugins and stuff we've written that we're hoping to possibly open source. There were some, like I said, the optimizations we did. We have an object called, or a plugin called Static Record, which is the opposite of Active Record, but it does everything that Active Record does except hit a database. So we kind of create some objects in YAML, and they're fairly static. They never change, like the site name, Chicago, LA, New York. Those never change. And so we just put those into YAML, and we used to have a site in the database, and every time we wanted to load up a page and figure out what site we were on, that was a query. So, a couple hundred queries to select star from site where ID or code equals Chicago. It's just like, you're killing me. So we just took that out of the database completely. So that's something where you might want to share.
Do you have any issues with Rails where you need to patch anything, or that you have to freeze to an older version?
No, we're running on 1.2.6 now.
Is there any cases that you had to rewrite to accommodate what you were trying to do? Or?
In our code?
Well, in Rails. I mean, Rails did everything you needed.
No, it didn't do everything we needed at all. But at least gave us the mechanisms to override it where we needed to. We have a lot of alias method chain type stuff on a lot of the Rails methods. So we don't like the way it, let's say we don't like the way, but we needed like a mechanism to track every field that changed on an active record object. And we looked into the guts of Rails and figured out which method is called every time you execute a setter on an active record, and we overwrote that method basically track that stuff. Because there was some expensive stuff that was happening behind the scenes, like geocoding our venues.
So there wasn't anything that you did that you thought should be in the core?
Well, we redid the logging. We have our own logger because the Rails standard logging is just like, you have no idea what's going on there.
Yeah.
And then especially when you get as much traffic as we do, everything just mixes up in the log and you have no idea what's what. So we have something called Better Logger, which it's a plugin, and we use it on all our Rails apps. So it tracks every request, so you can see the life cycle of that request in the log file. And it actually puts timestamps on. Who needs those? So that kind of stuff. So there's some deficiencies in what Rails gives you, but we haven't contributed anything back to Rails core. Although I think a lot of the plugins that we've developed, and if we open source them, we picked up and possibly put into Rails core if people think it's cool enough. And that's how we plan getting back to the community, doing talks like this and maybe presenting at RailsConf and sharing some of our plugins. Any more questions?
How much did your architecture change from your old site to, were you able to scale down or did you have to scale up?
From a hardware perspective, or well, it's hard to say. We ran on all the old Tribune's stuff before, which is just a huge infrastructure. And it runs all Chicago Tribune, all of LA Times, and you've got a dozen newspapers, all of Metromix, ChicagoSports.com, and there's just a ton of stuff that runs out there. And so their infrastructure is much, much larger than what ours is. So I would imagine the amount of utilization that the amount of resources that we utilized on that environment was probably equal to what we have now. So I don't think it's any more or any less.
Did the user interactivity, did that improve in the new structured point of Rails, or could you tell? Or
I don't know. Our marketing people probably could answer that question. But we did
just like even the speed of like search requests coming back.
I think so. I think the site's a lot faster. We look at how long it takes a page to come back and how long searches take on the average. We track in our logs how long every request takes, that type of stuff. And I think it's really fast. We also we've done a lot of just kind of tricks on the page to optimize user experience.
There's a lot of Ajax?
There's a lot of Ajax, but other stuff like there's perceived slowness as opposed to real slowness, and the business people perceive really, when we launched the site, they saw the site and said, this is really, really slow. And the reason it was slow is because of the way the page was structured and the divs we had and the way the page flowed in. For search engine optimization purposes, our content comes before our header and our divs. So we use the absolute positioning in our divs. And so it gets the headlines and that type of stuff up. But what happened was the page would load bottom first and the top would load. And there'd be some ads on the page and you have to wait till those divs would fully render, so you have to make ad calls. And so we actually have some cool little, I forgot the site. See what I'm talking about. Watch the calendar events. See, pop down? So we actually load the page first and then we load the ads afterwards. They don't like how that looks. Watch, see that calendar events and it just pops down.